We're going to be talking about boundaries. A wise woman told me that the healthiest human being has a center and has an edge. So, in order to move through this relationship as successfully as possible in this incredibly complex human experience, you need a center and you need an edge. If you're a person who has a really firm edge, but doesn't really have too much of a center, then you're likely to kind of present in the world as someone who is hyper independent, who has trouble with connection, who has trouble with intimacy. Alternatively, if I'm someone who doesn't have much of an edge at all, then I have what I like to call emotional incontinence, right? My emotions are just leaching out of me. And conversely, other people's bad energy is playing out on my own flesh, right? I am egregiously, sometimes violently affected by the emotions of other people. So there are a lot of conversations that are happening about boundaries. We've been talking about boundaries for a long time, and we'll probably talk about it as long as human beings live. And the reason is boundaries pose an inherent contradiction for your brain. So your brain is best thought of as a trans-rational machine, and you are living a trans-rational life. What this means is that you are not living an either-or life. You are not living a black or white life. You are not living a this or that life. You are living a both-and life. So this means that joy comes with the suffering. This means that life is both amazing and life can be utterly agonizing, and sometimes at the same time. This plays out, I think, most fundamentally in the brain because your brain is wired for fierce independence. You absolutely need autonomy and freedom and choice. Alternatively, at the same time, you're wired for fierce, deep interconnectivity, dependence, and connection. And so autonomy and connection can be as opposite as things can get. And if you don't know how to hold that tension, it can create so much more pain in our lives. So right now, lots of people are talking about boundaries, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, but I feel like it kind of misses the mark. So a lot of times when you read the information out there about boundaries, it says, okay, well, why I'm having trouble holding boundaries? Why? Because other people aren't as competent, right? So I'm somebody who overperforms and overaccommodates and oversaves. So I have to kind of come in and rescue everybody from their own incompetence. Or I'm too nurturing, or I'm too responsible, or I don't want to hurt other people's feelings. All of those things may very well be true, but they are not the most fundamental crux of the chronic problems that you may be having with boundaries in your life. Similarly, when you look at a lot of the advice out there, a lot of the advice are things that we already know, but yet we cannot behaviorally execute. So I was looking at some articles earlier today, and it was saying things like, be more assertive, name your limits, be direct. So just take name your limits. Fine, it's easy, and don't you ever do this again, or I'm gonna. So the problem isn't in the naming the limit. The problem is holding the limit and holding the limit over time, and particularly holding the limit over time with the people who matter the most to us. Okay? That is an incredibly complex ask. So I do a lot of work with leaders, and there's a lot of ways that boundaries can show up in your life depending on the type of person you are. So I thought I would talk today about boundaries for leaders. A lot of the leaders that I have worked with are overperformers, right? So they're incredibly smart and they're incredibly competent, and so they can hyperperform, they can over-accommodate, they can overwork. A lot of the leaders I work with work harder than the people around them. They work faster, they work more efficiently. But the problems start when the pain starts coming in their own body. Okay? So they're now over accommodating to the degree that they're not sleeping, they're having physical pain, maybe in their jaws or their backs or their necks or their wrists. They're unable to relax. They're unable to be present in other areas of their life. So I don't know if this is resonating with you, but if you have this emotional posture where you have been overperforming and over-accommodating, I want to tell you that it's because you are really competent, you are really responsible, and you are really good at the things that you are really good at. So when we want to change, we have to be radically, bravely clear about the trade-offs of the change. A lot of times it takes us to get pretty miserable and upset in our lives where we're like, I'm sick of this, I'm exhausted, it's never going to be like this again, okay? But if we really want the change to stick, we have to be prepared to say goodbye and grieve the loss of those parts of us that did indeed serve us, but now no longer work for us. So if you are an overperformer and an overaccommodator, this brought you many gifts in your life. So for example, maybe I thought that maybe people told me how valuable I was. Maybe it's helped me achieve a lot of success. Maybe I've gotten a lot of recognition. I've gotten a lot of respect. I've gotten a higher salary. I've gotten more opportunities. Maybe people have even told me implicitly or explicitly that they wouldn't be okay without me. Right? So that's again a double-edged sword. On one level, it's really affirming my value, and on the other side of that, it can feel incredibly suffocating. So what I want you to see is whenever it comes time to say goodbye to a part of yourself, and that's all boundaries are, it's starting to draw lines in ways that they have historically not been drawn, is you have to say goodbye to this part of you that did a lot of wonderful things for you. There was a part of you that was trying to protect you, right? That's the only reason they were overdoing it, over-accommodating, overworking, to protect you, to make sure you were safe enough, to make sure those that you cared about were safe enough, to feel special enough. So when you are ready to leave, it's important to think about two things. And the first thing I want you to think about is that if I hold the boundaries in a new way, I have to say goodbye to these older parts of myself. The second thing is if I want to hold boundaries, that only matters when it is expressly hard. Boundaries are immaterial. If here's the boundary and everybody's playing way over here, it does not matter until I start to approach the boundary. And so the boundary conversation happens in two worlds. The first world is the if-only world, and the second world is the no matter what world. It is the no matter what's that determine when you fall, and we will all fall over and over and over again in this life. I mean, the thing about life is that it always kills us, sometimes metaphorically and then ultimately actually. So the question then is, when we fall, do we stay down or do we rise? And so when it comes to this incredibly important topic of boundaries in our life, you got to reflect on the if only versus the no matter what. So will you hold your boundaries if only other people give you permission? Will you hold your boundaries if only you're certain you're going to be okay? Will you hold your boundaries if only other people don't get mad at you? Will you hold your boundaries if only it doesn't destroy your marriage? Will you hold your boundaries if only you get that next promotion? Will you hold your boundaries if only your parents aren't mad at you? Or have you come to a point where you're willing to say, I will hold my boundaries no matter what? And if you come to this place of no matter what, because I want to point out that the if only, those aren't boundaries, those are suggestions. Those are pleasant guidelines that you hope other people will internalize so you don't have to do the work. when it comes time to live in the no matter what world, that is a world that plays out not in other people, not in the abstract, not in an academic realm. It is a world that plays out in your own flesh. Specifically, it is painful to hold boundaries in our own body, right? And when I say it plays out on the landscape of your own flesh, it is the clenching of your own jaw. It is the tightening of your own shoulders. It is the sweating of your own hands. It is the pounding of your own chest. It is the breaking of your own heart. And it's only when you're able to hold your own physiology, the pain in your own body in a new way, that you can really make headway in holding boundaries in a sustainable way in your life.